Hello and welcome to another standard video here in the preview event for Secrets of Strixhaven. Today we're building around Pox Plague, a 5-mana sorcery, saying each player loses half their life, then discards half the cards in hand, and then sacrifices half of the permanents they control of their choice, round down each time. So Pox Plague is a symmetrical effect, but we can break the symmetry in a number of ways. The easiest is just by controlling the Bloodletter, which now doubles the amount of life the opponent loses. So if they're at an even life total, Pox Plague will just end the game on the spot, which is a pretty nice win condition. Or we can use it alongside an Obsessive Pursuit, which makes a clue token each turn at the cost of 1 life. This deck does have a lot of life loss built into it, which can of course come back to bite you sometimes, but if you're about to lose half your life anyways, it kind of feels like you may as well make use of it beforehand. So the Pursuit making a clue token each turn, which then gives us a lot of sacrifice fodder for the Pox Plague, and then if we sacrifice a whole bunch of clue tokens and other permanents and attack with a creature in the same turn, we get to put a number of +1 counters on it equal to the number of sacrificed permanents, and if that number is 3 or more, the creature also gains a lifelink until end of turn, so that can also make up for all the life loss from our own Pox Plague. And then if we're gonna run Bloodletter in the deck, we may as well include the other demon package with the Unholy Annex to draw additional cards and make the opponent lose 2 life, as well as 2 copies of the Core, which is another changeling, so another demon to synergize with the Unholy Annex. And then Unstoppable Slasher, as we know, also combos with a Bloodletter. If it hits the opponent, they lose half their life total, which essentially gets doubled, so they lose their entire life total now. And the Slasher rounds up, so this one's always lethal with a Bloodletter, whereas the Pox is only lethal if they're at an even life total, which is important to keep in mind. And then I'm also running the full set of the Bitterbloom Bearer, which makes a 1/1 fairy token each turn at the cost of 1 life, so this can also help us go wide to help set up our Pox Plague, so we don't have to sacrifice a bunch of lands to it, but instead maybe have a few fairy tokens left over that we don't mind sacrificing. And then it also makes it more likely that we'll have a creature that can attack with the Obsessive Pursuit. And then rounding out the deck, we've got another ramp card with a black Terminus, which can occasionally reanimate stuff as well. Nowhere to Run as a removal spell that stays in play, so another permanent we don't mind sacrificing. And then of course Requiring Hex, just too efficient not to play if you're playing black. And then the mana base also has the full set of Fabled Passage, which might seem weird since we're not a landfall deck, but it is a land we can sacrifice, which in turn gives us an extra +1 counter of Obsessive Pursuit if we manage to attack, so that can also potentially make the difference between having a lifelink or not having a lifelink on a turn where we sacrifice 2 clue tokens, for instance. Do have to be careful, because the +1 counters from Pursuit are a bit of a non-bow with a Slasher, because if it dies with counters on it, it's not going to return back to the battlefield, so just keep that in mind as well. And then we also have a few copies of Realm of Co to make additional spirit tokens in case a game drags out and we need additional creatures to attack with. So yeah, that's our deck. Now let's jump into some games and see how the deck does. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand. We've got Bitterbloom Bearer and Nowhere to Run to increase our permanent count to hopefully set up an effective Pox Plague. Opponent on a blue-red spells deck. So those don't always have a lot of permanents in play, so they might end up having to sacrifice a bunch of lands to this. But they might have some cheap burn spells for the Bearer, so I'm actually leaning Obsessive Pursuit. I guess there's also Spell Snare to consider, which is a reason to keep the Bearer available at instant speed. Now let's get Pursuit down. Alright, no Spell Snare. If they play a creature to pressure our life total, we can Nowhere to Run. Opponent's setting up with an extra treasure. So could play the Annex to draw even more. Although I kind of like double spelling here. Terminus, maybe end of turn Bitterbloom Bear. And then next turn I could already Plague. Alright, opponent taps out for the loot, which luckily for us is not very effective when they're about to lose 2 lanes. So now we want to make sure to sack Fabled Passage, which will increase our count for Pursuit. And then Plague before attacking. So discard 1 card, probably another Pursuit. And then sacrifice 5 permanents. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And attack. Get 6+1 counters, lifelink, opponent falls to 2. Gets to untap with loot and 1 land. So we'll see if they can recover. Consult with 1 land in play is pretty sad. And yeah, opponent seems dead here. Awesome, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a keepable hand, maybe a bit light on interaction. And as always, looking for the Pox Plague as well. Turn 2 Pursuit, turn 3 Core, turn 4 Bloodletter. Terminus. Can maybe get that down next turn alongside the Bloodletter. Opponent with a Bearer, so they might be doing something similar with 2 lands that can produce black mana. And a Zealot, maybe more of a sacrifice deck. Alright, so we have options. But I do want to get a creature down so we can leverage the Pursuit a bit better. So I don't mind getting 1 Bloodletter down. Even though the Annex would already start draining with the Core. And if they can't answer it, we also have a decent blocker. And Bloodletter doesn't double the Bitter Bloom damage, since it's only during our turn that it doubles. Alright, the Botanist. Yeah, that's pretty scary. Because now if we were to wipe the board, they can deal a lot of damage. The Zealot in play also represents a lot of damage. So good thing we drew a nowhere to run. But yeah, on the board, things are not looking too great for me. So, get the Annex down. And then I'm gonna have to answer the Botanist first chance I get, pretty much. Which could be now. I don't think I'm attacking. Yeah, I guess I could wait for after their draw step. Or maybe now, before they get an extra creature they can sacrifice. So we'll see how many creatures they're willing to sack to the Zealots. 2 damage for each creature that gets sacrificed here. Opponent lets it go. Possible they have another one in hand. It is legendary after all. A Blood Witch instead. So casting a Pox Plague is gonna cost me a lot of life, but with a Bloodletter it would also just win me the game. So the problem here is our opponent can jump with a flyer, sacrifice, and then it will deny the life gain I get from a potential lifelink of Obsessive Pursuit. So I don't think that's the plan. Can still sack 1 token, maybe see what we draw, and then play another Bloodletter. Slasher's not particularly helpful. So now with double Bloodletter, the damage from Annex scales very nicely as well. No point in attacking. So our opponent takes a whopping 8, and we drew the Plague. So if I can survive this upcoming turn, Plague with a single Bloodletter would be game over. I guess we have to make sure our opponent's on an even life total, because the Plague does round down. Ooh, a Rabbit attack. Pumping their team. They get to draw. So they're looking for another Botanist, pretty much. That would end the game. Infestation Sage is fine. And a Voice. Alright, so we should have it now with a Plague. Although just the Annex trigger would do it. Opponent's gonna keep sacking to draw while they can. So yeah, the a rabbit attack is a pretty cool innovation for this archetype. Let's Plague. Discard a card. Sadly, our opponent's already at -8, but otherwise I could get a bunch of extra +1 counters of the Pursuit as well. As we sacrificed 9 permanents. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Hand is a little painful, but we do have the Annex plus core at least. So we'll give it a try. Opponent Abzan colors with a Professor. Could get a Pursuit going instead of the Bear. Yeah, it's kind of a close call. A Bear could be good if we eventually sack a bunch of stuff to get some +1 counters of the Pursuit. But our opponent could have some removal, so at least the Pursuit is less likely to get destroyed. So there's a life gain angle here. Alright, so this turn maybe Annex. Next turn Core, ideally with a 2-drop. Gonna be taking some damage. I guess with the land we could also go straight into Bloodletter. I see the Loafing Pest. Essence Channeler is a bat. So we're down to 5. It's not looking good for us. Another Annex. So best I can do is Bloodletter. But probably gonna have to chump. Yeah, in hindsight, the Bitterbloom Bear might have worked out better, because it could have generated some chump blockers. And now a Cleric. All-out attack. Trigger, get more counters. And still die. GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play with a keepable hand. Facing a red-white. Well, we've got the Bloodletter into Plague, maybe. Opponent Jeskai colors and an Airbender Ascension, so they might be doing some flickering. Right, get the Annex down. So we've got a nice curve. Lots of card draw in what seems to be a grindy matchup. Right, Jill can bounce stuff, including the Annex. So it's possible I'm better off going for Nowhere to Run plus another Pursuit. It's hard to say. Yeah, I think I still try Bloodletter. And next turn I can at least Annex plus Nowhere to Run. And if they don't bounce the demon, they could just die. But I imagine they'll have some flicker effects. There's a new Owl with the prepared mechanic, as well as a Daydream. So goodbye Bloodletter. This is a sorcery. And a Helix Ghost Face. And draw another Nowhere to Run. Yeah, I probably don't want to take another 3 damage. Opponent had another Jill anyways. But now we can go Bloodletter plus nowhere to run. Think I still wait on the Plague. Try and be patient. Probably could have waited on the Fabled Passage here. Alright, so let's see if this works. It does. So now they'll need another answer to the Bloodletter that doesn't involve bouncing stuff with Jill. Alright, Ascension will do. Although I can now replay this for 2 mana. So we're just a turn away from going Bloodletter into Plague in one fell swoop. So this turn I could also just make a token with a Realm, which can then make use of the extra counters from Pursuit. Yeah, and then I can play another Pursuit here, or I can replay the Bloodletter anyways, since it's only 2 mana, and hope they don't have another Jill. I guess I also need to make sure I still draw the land, so maybe I'm actually sacking a clue. Yeah, let's just pass. And then I can start by sacking a clue. If I draw lands, I can make a token. If not, I can keep drawing to make sure I get the lands for Plague. Alright, so no token. I guess now a bear is tempting. Alright, let's try it. Still hoping to draw lands, but they might have different answers now. Yep, another Helix. Also could have gone face, to be fair. Oh, I guess I miscounted the amount of lands I have. I have enough for Bloodletter into Plague. So let's try it then. If they have a bounce spell for the Bloodletter, what happens? Or I guess like an Ang to airbend it. I guess I would kind of just die. So maybe I should just wait another turn and get another bearer down to have an extra creature to make use of the Pursuit. Opponent did have the Conductor. Enters prepared. So can flicker their own stuff. Opponent does not attack. And then I'll flash in another bear. So now we should finally have enough for a lethal Plague. Although I'm also in danger at 4 life, about to halve my life total. But with our opponent at 24, we just instantly win the game. Alright, sacrifice 9 permanents, gladly. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we would get 9 counters on Pursuit. But yeah, opponent's already at 0 life. Starting Town is actually kind of a cool answer to a Plague. If you can lose a life in response and go to an odd life total, it can sometimes save you. But yeah, we finally got there. Sweet, on to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. We have a keepable hand. A bearer into Annex, into hopefully a Bloodletter. Opponent going big with Augmenter. So a blue-green fractal deck. Can expect a lot of X spells, which scale well with Augmenter. Prodigy can maybe draw a card next turn. Core is decent, but I think I still prefer Annex into Bloodletter next turn. And then we're just missing our Pox Plague. The Professor can also draw a bunch of cards with extra +1 counters being placed on it. Can probably take 3, maybe next turn I'll have to start jumping. And the Annex is good for 4 damage with the Bloodletter in place, so we are potentially threatening a lethal in the air. The Mutagen Man is not necessarily going to change that. But it will draw a bunch of cards of the Professor, so it does have a good synergy. Can we draw Pox Plague? We cannot. Alright, then should be a straightforward attack. There we go. Sweet, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Seem to have a keeper. Got our Pursuit for a card advantage. ×2 now. And then hopefully the Bitterbloom Bear survives to eventually pick up some counters. I'll start with a Pursuit. And then next turn we can double spell with a Terminus. Alright, Drowner. We can maybe remove. So Asper, maybe with a bunch of Enter the Battlefield triggers and flicker effects, as we see the Moderator. Already picks up a counter. So I might have to remove this while I can. Although I guess it doesn't flicker each turn, it's only when it enters. Yeah, let's pass. Maybe I get to flash in the Bearer. And then with Fabled Passage I could maybe get some lifelink going. Opponent taps out for the Duelist. Okay. So play the Bearer. And then I definitely want to know where to run while the coast is clear. I think I save Fabled Passage to set up lifelink next turn. Because if I Fabled Passage and want to play Nowhere to Run, I won't have enough mana to sacrifice 2 clue tokens, which is what I would need for lifelink. So then let's go Nowhere to Run your Duelists. Play the core. And hit you for 1. And then I probably don't want to trade away my token, because I want to have at least 1 creature left. And then with a second Pursuit, we could potentially give both creatures lifelink. And a Pox Plague would also be a nice top deck here. Airbender Ascension, clean answer for the token. Goes for the Bitterbloom Bear instead. And a Stalker, I guess, can exile the token. Yeah, that's a setback, losing both creatures. So now the Pursuit plan is not going to work. And we're under some serious pressure. Could technically still animate the core, but that's going to use up all my mana. Bloodletter is interesting. We know that they can replay the Stalker to clear a path. Let's see, Airbending. Can I play this at any time? I can. Do I even bother playing the Bloodletter? Could just pass with the plan of using core as a blocker. Let's try that. And then still flash in the Bear end of turn. Just need to get 1 attack in. 2 cards in hand. They've got big plans. So presumably an answer to the core. That works. So it would fall to 1 here. So I can actually afford to play the Bitterbloom Bear. Emeritus of Ideation can Ancestral Recall to draw 3. Also pretty nice if you can reset it with the Ascension. Alright, so just gotta take my turn here. Fall to 1, and another Pursuit's not quite what I needed. So, yeah, 4 mana to animate Core is just not quite gonna do it here. I guess I'll start by drawing, see what I get. Another Fabled Passage, okay. Does that keep me alive? I can now activate the Core and give it lifelink. Gain 7, but our opponent can attack back for 7, and then I still lose to the Pursuit, sadly. Yeah, we just needed to get the ball rolling a little sooner, but our opponent had just enough interaction to deal with all our stuff. And there's no way I can gain life at instant speed without a Requiting Hex or something in hand. Take 7, and 1 more from Pursuit. Duelist can also end it here. Alright, GG's. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the play. Double Core, Requiting Hex. Not the most exciting hand, I'll admit. Yeah, feels like I need a bit of card draw at least to go with these. Alright, this one could use a bit more mana. But a third land goes a long way in setting up the Annex. Opponent setting up with the first year. Pretty good in the face of a Slasher, since it buys them a turn. Can Rampant Growth. So ideally draw land, so I can get a 3-drop down. If not, we can maybe sack a Clue. Alright, a land please. And then probably gonna hex the first year, but we'll see. Scavengers next, 4/4 Death Touch. Can later mill 7 as well. So my hope is that they can't remove the Bloodletter, and then we can just set up a Pox Plague for the win. A bit ambitious against an opponent that has black mana, but we'll give it a shot. Alright, opponent's milling, and they found the Ice Still Explorer, it seems, as well as the new Lewin, which they chose here. So yeah, if I draw an untapped land, which is any land in the deck, this wins me the game. Did not get there. Alright, so we have to recalibrate. I can either Annex or just sack 2 clues. 2 clues dig a bit deeper. Annex gains me some life. I can take 7 or even 8 with a Pursuit next turn. So I think I'd rather sack the clues. Can still maybe draw land and play Annex afterwards, which is the best of both worlds. Although going for Slasher also would have been reasonable. And then I don't think I'm blocking. They do have some landfall synergy, so kind of worried about maybe a Harmonizer doubling their creature's power. But let's get in. So we'll see if Bloodletter lives. Pox Plague can end it. Although if Bloodletter lives, our opponent kind of dies either way. A Researcher can reanimate stuff, but not yet. So it looks like the Plague will get there. The Archaic giving the Researcher extra +1 counters as well. Alright, and then Fabled Passage would technically give me more Pursuit counters as well. That's why it's in the deck. So discard a card. Sacrifice 5 permanents here, I believe. Or 6. 1, 2, 3. At this point, 5, 6. Ooh, I guess I didn't notice their creature had reach. Plus the fact that they had an odd life total means that the Plague didn't actually win the game since it rounds down. So probably should have kept the Unholy Annex here, because their opponent actually gets to survive now. Oh well, keeps the game more interesting. They get another turn to maybe turn it around. Alright, never mind. Our opponent uses the reanimate mode and just loses the game getting back the Emeritus. I'll take it. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with a keepable hand, assuming we can hit some land drops here. Facing blue-red. Can flash in the bearer. Opponent consults. So I guess we're in here for the long haul. Let's see if they want to fight over this. Yes, a Vibrant Outburst. Well, I can resolve the Slasher now. Opponent is playing white as well. Well, may as well try the Bloodletter. If it resolves, it's game over. Assuming they can't answer the Slasher. Opponent's gonna take out the Slasher. Tap the Bloodletter, Slasher comes back. And it's possible they have a sweeper next turn. The Northwind Avatar, alright, so if I draw an untapped land, Pox Plague is just game over. And we did. So discard a card. Opponent's already at 0 and we're still deciding, which is pretty funny.
That's rough, buddy.
Seemed fitting while holding the Obsessive Pursuit. And there we go, on to the next one. Alright, we're on the draw. Promising hand, assuming we get to curve Bloodletter into Pox Plague. Annex on 3 as well. Just need to make sure we don't get run over early on. Opponent on a Mardu deck. And no play. And we'll get the Pursuit going. No play, end of turn. And now a Mako, so a discard deck. Alright, I think I still annex, even though it's gonna cost me quite a bit of life. Can hope to keep the Bloodletter around next turn. And we're setting up pretty nicely for the Plague. Take 2. So I have to imagine they'll have an answer here, but since we have a second Bloodletter, I think I still go for it. As opposed to maybe going Bearer plus Pursuit. They could have the new Silver Quill Charm that can deal with a 2-powered creature. Just a bitter triumph, discarding the Eternal Student, which also grows the Shark. So we lose another 2 life. Yeah, can't keep this up forever. The upside of the Bitterbloom play would have been more likely Pursuit giving me +1 counters next turn and lifelink. But yeah, they probably would have had an answer at instant speed as well. So if they have another Bitter Triumph, I kind of just die. So maybe, let's see, opponent's plan is to make a bunch of 1/1s. So I think Bloodletter is still reasonable. Could also make a Demon Token of the Ritual Chamber, doesn't really change the math. Would prefer the Bloodletter to set up Plague at that point. Nowhere to Run could try and answer the Shark. And then I'm losing 2. This one could maybe grow. And then I lose another one of Pursuit, so yeah, I think I just gotta Bloodletter and hope for the best. And next trigger on the stack. Alright, so we get to gain 2 this time. So if we can keep the Bloodletter, we can maybe win the game. Nope, opponents had another Bitter Triumph in hand all along, or maybe drew one. Can set up a Flamewake Phoenix now, and this is definitely lethal. Alright, that's too bad. On to the next one. Okay, we're on the draw with what looks like a keeper. Pursuit into Slasher, maybe a Plague at 5. And then Passage can be an extra +1 counter of Pursuit. Opponent with Trainer Think Twice, so they've got the value angle covered. They might have some flicker effects with the various warp creatures like Quantum Riddler to keep those in play. Since Splash Portal plays well with a Trainer. Alright, this is now 4 colors. So they're going deep. Well, Slasher is kind of a must-answer card. Whether it's jumping each turn or removing it. Prismari Charm to surveil and draw, that's fine. This set introduced quite a few powerful 2-mana cantrips, including the one where if you have an instant and sorcery in the graveyard, it turns into a draw 2 effect. And the Impractical Joke, Sorcery Speed, dealing 3 damage. Well, we can run it back. And at least we're building up some clue tokens that we can sack to the Plague. So they'll probably have to sack a bunch of lands to it. Another Trainer. Okay. So unless they have another Impractical Joke, the Slasher should get an attack in, with a whole bunch of extra counters from Pursuit. I see, that's what they're building towards, together as one. That's why they have all those colors. Well, I drew a Bloodletter, so it's tempting to wait another turn, but what are the odds that our opponent can't remove it? Because yeah, this can already answer the Bloodletter as far as we know. So instead, let's go for the Plague. So I want to keep the Pursuit in play. I'm discarding a land. Opponent has to discard 2 cards, 2 creatures, and I guess a land would do. But then the Slasher gets to hit them. Alright, so sacrifice 4 of those. 1 land. Question is whether I sack another land or maybe the tapped Slasher. Yeah, that's probably fine. Slasher comes back. Get to attack, gets 7 +1 counters. And at 1 life, our opponent just dies to the Slasher trigger. Alright, so we got to see this monoblack Pox deck in action. Overall, the deck felt a little bit clunky, since you're trying to resolve a 5-mana sorcery, and not every board state is necessarily great for it. but if you get to curve out with the right tools, especially an Obsessive Pursuit with a creature that can attack, you can do a lot of damage. I almost wish that the Pox didn't make your opponent lose life or yourself lose life, so you could realistically cast more than one copy during a game, but as it stands, it usually costs too much life to cast the first one, so then the game usually ends pretty soon thereafter. But yeah, overall, of course, the combo with Bloodletter is powerful, but we already had the Rush of Dread in Standard, which at least rounds up instead of down, so that's actually the more reliable 5-mana sorcery, if that's what you're looking for. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend this one for the ranked ladder, but still a fun experiment. So yeah, that'll do it for today's gameplay. Want to thank you for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, have a nice day.